Teaching teen and adult beginner students can be incredibly rewarding and a chance to stay on your toes as a piano teacher. For example, these two demographics, they don't want basic music, but their ability can somewhat dictate this, unless we make some changes to what we're doing. I'm going to be sharing 4 ways that adult and teen beginner students can create their own musical voice. Be sure to stay to the end because I'm going to give you some tips for choosing repertoire that makes this a lot easier. If we haven't met, I'm Rosemarie Penner, online piano teacher and composer at Must Love Music, and I make learning fun, simple, and interactive, with creative ideas and resources to bring on those smiles. So as a school teacher, I taught pretty much every grade between grade 1 through 12. And then I actually did a little bit at the college level as well, where I worked with college students. And I loved teaching junior high. That was my favorite age group. However, as a piano teacher, I still love teaching this group, but I've also grown to really love teaching senior high and adult students. The conversations are just so much different than they are with my younger students, though, younger students, their cute smiles and the stories, it's pretty awesome too. Now, having said that, teens and adults, they want music that sounds interesting and it's not watered down, right? They do not want Mary Had a Little Lamb or a Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. The challenge is to find music that sounds complex, but it's within their learning ability. The workaround is to choose repertoire that can be taught either entirely or partially by rote. This ensures that you can build on the repertoire in ways that your adult and teen beginner piano students can start developing their own musical voice. Tip number 1 is to change pitch by octaves. So for your beginner students, we don't want to move too much the hand position, but octaves, they tend to be okay. It's a little easier, and it's a great opportunity for them to practice keyboard geography. In the song Light Reflecting on Raindrops, this actually becomes really easy as we can move things up or down depending on what a student wants. What if I change that down an octave? So it still has that raindrop feel, but it feels a little different. It changes the mood. Here's one more quick example. If I move that down. So the second time, it felt a little bit more like there was a kaleidoscope of sounds or a kaleidoscope of colors in the light reflecting. Tip number 2, play with voicing. So who says that the melody has to be that line of single notes? What we could do is, if there are chord bridges in the piece, if they're interesting, if they have movement, then it could actually be a precursor for playing the melody over chords that come in much later levels. So an example of this is in May I Have This Dance. What I'm going to do is play it so that the melody is in one hand, and then I'm going to change the voicing. I'm going to skip ahead to a different part, and I'm going to put the voicing in the opposite section. I'm going to skip ahead. Very similar. They're just an octave apart, but by changing the voicing, all of a sudden it becomes really interesting. In this case, even though I talked about chord bridges, this is just a single note, but you can do this with chord bridges as well. Tip 3 is to change the meter. Now, I'm going to say this will not work for every song, and it's definitely easier going from, say, 3/4 to 4/4. This is a fantastic strategy when you have a student who they're probably going to add an extra beat anyways. And so it helps them really hear the difference between that the triple and duple meters. For example, this one, as we're developing our student's ear, an example comes from Daffodils Peeking from the Snow. Now, what if I change that to 4/4? So I would just tell my student, take the very last note of every measure and hold it for an extra beat. For a student, especially if you can record them playing and then they get to hear it back, this is a really powerful way for them to understand how meter really affects the feel of a piece. Tip number 4, add or change the pedal. At the beginner level, we often have music that either has no pedal or it's held for the entire time. Now, with adult beginner students or teen beginner students, they can pick up on this a little bit faster. What I would say, while it's challenging, it works best for sections of music where maybe it's just chords. That way, they're not having to think too much about what is all going on. A great example of this comes from Dance of the Monarch Butterflies. So I'll give you an example of no pedal, and then if a student was to change out the pedal every time that the chord changed. Keep in mind, this will take a little more instruction from you in terms of what that's like. I wouldn't get into all the intricacies with your student though. Just give them a basic lesson. So it sounds okay, but if we add in the pedal, it's just going to make it a little smoother, a little bit more peaceful. It sounds so peaceful, doesn't it? And it's a great way for your student that they can learn it as is, but then they can add a little bit something extra to the piece so that it sounds more to where they want to sound. 4 ways that your teen and adult beginner piano students can start creating their own musical voice are: 1. Change the pitch by an octave. This often changes the mood, whether substantially or not so substantially. 2. Play with voicing beyond the typical melody. 3. Change the meter when it's easy for your student. That's the caveat. So either they are able to just add 1 beat by holding something, that tends to be the easiest. And number 4, add or change the pedal in the song. I did promise you a bonus tip for choosing repertoire. So something that either has a repeating pattern or that has many elements that your teen or adult beginner piano student is familiar with are the best options when you're wanting to move beyond just reading the music or just playing exactly what you have taught them. Now, all the musical examples that I used in this video came from the First Spring Soundscapes collection. It was specifically designed for teen and adult beginner piano students because I know they want to sound more advanced than perhaps their playing would say. All of these, they have something that sounds complex, but then include those 2 elements that I talked about. There are repeating patterns that then they can play with how it sounds the first time and how it sounds the second time, or that it has a lot of elements that they probably have seen in other music as well. So I would love to hear from you. Have you used these 4 ways that your beginner, teen, and adult students can begin to develop and create their own musical voices? Is there one in particular that you're going to add to your teaching that maybe you hadn't thought of? Now, if you haven't already subscribed, be sure to hit the subscribe button. You don't want to miss out on more teaching tips like this one. And thank you so much for watching.